We can jump into that third ruling that we wanted to talk about today, which is all around vendor due diligence. And how do you as a firm make sure that you're confidently meeting some of the requirements? And that is, the SEC recently proposed new oversight requirements that specifies that when you're engaging with third-party vendors, at least certain activities with third-party vendors, you need to keep and maintain records related to the due diligence, to the monitoring of the updates related to these vendors. So all things like, for example, SOC 2 Type 2 reports, any vendor assessments, any critical communications, probably all communications would be better, proposals that maybe you've received and gone back and forth with particular vendors. So things like that. And, the one thing I'll just quickly mention before we, have a conversation between the three of us is that, this is such a unique area that I believe will start to garner more and more attention. Franklin, you shared a really relevant example of that when we were meeting a couple of days ago. And we're actually talking about this in real time with our clients, both broker dealers and RIAs that are leveraging FutureVault at the enterprise level, where there's this corporate vault piece of functionality that allows you to store and maintain all of your enterprise and compliance documents. So those could be your business insurance, anything related to your reps and your advisors, anything related to your taxes and your accounting, and your vendors as well too. So you could have a vendor folder in there and everything, and you can have subfolders related to all of the different vendors that you work with or that are beginning to work with. And then you can store the appropriate documentation in there. So I just wanted to share that little tidbit before we sort of have a discussion between the three of us.
Yeah, I'll just quickly chime in on that. And it's a two-way street, as you mentioned, Kristian, right? So it's, being a software provider, we get vendor due diligences imposed on us. And similarly, from an IRA or a broker dealer, they have to do vendor due diligence on their vendors. And evidencing, again, artifacting it, having it on demand, doing a refresh. Sometimes it's annual. You have to go back and do that questionnaire again, having that in a structured format and auditable. So year on year, if it's handled properly and structured in a vault-like platform, you can track delta movements on the answers back from your vendors, what changed, any change of personnel, any change of technology, et cetera. But again, it's all about being able to stitch together a point in time. Here's how we're doing. Here are the vendors. Here are the qualifications. Here's the journey they've taken. And again, it's like a timeline. Having all those available on demand, because everyone gets audited. Everyone has an auditor. Everyone has someone doing due diligence on each other. So imagine a world where you can just expose the answers to your questions through a platform. You can share it with a trusted third party. They can come in, see your evidence, but get comfortable and proceed with their vendor due diligence. So it's, again, making that more seamless, transparent, auditable, and less of a disruption to businesses on both sides of the equation, right? It's the person doing the audit or the due diligence and vice versa. You want to make that as streamlined as possible.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Daniel. I think adding that streamline and tracking that is going to be tantamount. Now, vendor due diligence on my side is, in one of my themes of seeing how the world evolves, is one of the biggest growth areas for vendor due diligence, but at the same time, it is the biggest gap for every advisor and every independent IAR underneath the broker dealer who may have bought their own Salesforce, bought their own planning software, whatever technology stack they feel is going to empower them. And they're engaging with that vendor or engaging with that data migration company or whatever it is. Where is that PI sitting? If I'm doing data migration, did it go through some guy's laptop because he's a consultant for it? And how is that protecting me? To your earlier point, Kristian, when this is a real time, we actually were integrating a lot of data securely into Salesforce. So AppCrown, Salesforce, we're all secure. Everyone's secured. The consultant was not secure. And the broker dealer of record, national firm, I would say a top 10, said that this consultant is not secured and we're basically going to not approve that person. And I had known the CEO of that consulting firm and I say, hey, listen, let me go to bat for you and talk to the compliance officer and say, is there a way to revisit your firm? And I was probably the most surprised in the 13 years that I've been doing this. The broker dealer says, once we cancel you because you did not pass security review, we will basically never look at you ever again. So essentially, it is a one-time shot. If you're not ready to play, you will never be ready to play, and people don't have the time to go back and revisit you. That's not what the game is. And I think that to me was an eye-opener, because I've never seen that behavior in all the years prior, and I've been doing this since 2009. So that to me tells me, okay, the vendor due diligence for a lot of people coming into the game who may not, like you, Daniel, you guys have that global view. So in many ways, FutureVault has, that global view as well, inheriting from your experience from HSBC. But I can tell you, a lot of the vendor systems out there do not have the same global view that you guys have at FutureVault. And it's just really interesting and fascinating. Now, on our side, I will throw it out there. I actually view my clients as a third party. So I actually risk rank all my clients, when I onboard them for AppCrown, when we process our data. And we always observe, like, when they send me an advisor sends me their vendor due diligence, I would see it and I say, yeah, we'll fill that out. But I would risk rank you as 1 out of 5, where 5 is great and 1 is kind of you just getting started in life kind of situation. So I do risk rank my own clients all the time, every time, and usually on a semi-annual basis. But it's fascinating where even for them, the ability to keep all this vendor due diligence into a centralized folder. So when the SEC auditor walks into the room, based to your point earlier, Daniel, it's a volatile moment. You need to be able to have that ready to go, because it is a volatile moment in the marketplace. That's what people need. And it's fascinating.
That's an interesting point about the risk ranking, because you're one of the first people I've heard mention that that's something that you proactively do. Do you have a certain formula that you look into with regards to the different types of risk? And has there ever been a point in time where maybe you've had to present that to FINRA or the SEC and say, hey, look, like, I'm doing what I need to do on my side. This client is actually at risk. So from a liability perspective, the onus is actually on the client.
Yeah, I think there's probably 3 situations over the last 13 years where, when I worked with a broker-dealer or one of their reps, they had a very opaque entity structure. And if you have more than one entity associated to your registration license, for me as the designated CISO for AppCrown, I would rank you as like 0 on a scale of like 1 to 5, being 1 is fine and 5 is great, 0 being completely AML risk all over. I would risk rank you. And if things get aggressive, then we would say, yeah, I think this is something where we need to be proactive on to protect ourselves. But, one thing I do realize, and as it relates to the vendor side, is that, you get to 0 when you don't have a great way of papering, or you're masking massive different entities to purchase, say, my services of loading data into Salesforce. And you come to me and say, hey, I have like 6 Salesforce licenses. I'm like, well, why do you have 6 Salesforce licenses? That makes no sense to me. There are some weird situations out there. And, the number one thing for me personally is, do you have a system to archive your interactions as an RA firm with not just me, but everyone else that, I'm supposed to integrate with? And I will measure that against the bigger picture. And most of the time, the best ones I say out there have a digital vault like yourselves, and they're putting everything in there, and you're seeing, okay, this is a very mature mindset coming to play a very mature game. Because don't forget, we're all in this game to protect who? The investor client. So to your earlier, how you started off this webinar, Kristian, to that story and tying together, to protect that, you need a vault, you need a way to communicate securely. You guys have a great audit trail system. I've seen many advisors through from seeing you guys at T3 last year to over the last 12 months, incredible demand. So we're very proud of ourselves and honored, frankly, to learn a lot from you guys, and you, Daniel, to, support that, hey, advisor, use FutureVault, because maybe it's CYA on so many things in life.
Yeah, and it's about protecting the industry too, right? So I think and ultimately providing, again, that client as well with a secure digital vault. We're a vendor, we've been reviewed, the due diligence has been performed on us, we're SOC 2 Type 2. It's all the way up the constituent chain, all the stakeholders up, that everyone's comfortable, that there's transparency, and we're meeting the standards are there for a reason. It's not to inhibit business, they're there to protect the industry and the investor.